The Man Who Didn't Mind Losing. Chapter 1. The Sound of Dust. The first sound of morning was the tick of the radiator, a small, uncertain heartbeat coming from deep within the house. It coughed once, hesitated, and then continued its quiet argument with the cold. Elliot Crane lay still, listening. The house was old enough to have moods. It remembered things, drafts, footsteps, absences, the way a body remembers pain after it's healed. He preferred mornings like this, unhurried, without birds or traffic or any hint of obligation. Just the hum of something working hard enough to stay alive. He had begun to think of himself that way too. When he rose, he wrapped a sweater around his shoulders, slow as a man remembering he still has a body. The blinds opened onto a patient gray light, October light, the kind that presses through trees without asking to be noticed. There were letters on the table. He ignored them at first. Coffee came first, a ritual that mattered precisely because nothing else did. Slow pour, one scoop too many. The steam rose like a faint ghost. Only when the cup was warm in his hands did he open the first envelope. A university newsletter. His name appeared once, near the end, in a list of retirees honored for their years of service. He hadn't attended the ceremony. The second was from the bank. The third had no return address. Only his name, handwritten in a careful, elegant script that seemed almost shy. Inside was a single line. Do you ever think about what you might have been? No signature. He read it twice, as though the second reading might offer a different truth. Then he set it aside, like a stranger's confession mistakenly delivered to his door. Outside, the hedge had grown wild, a green barricade thick with neglect. He trimmed it without hurry, cutting and pausing, like a man listening for something beneath the noise. The street remained itself, a bicyclist passing, a woman walking her dog, the faint smell of rain held in the air like a secret. This was the kind of town that believed in repetition. Its sameness had become his refuge. When he first arrived, people assumed the university had forced him out. Budget cuts, they whispered. Poor Elliot. Never published enough. He never corrected them. Truth required more energy than silence. He had chosen this, the quiet, the smallness, the privilege of being forgotten. As he gathered the trimmed branches, a voice rose behind the hedge. Professor Crane? He turned. A woman stood by the mailbox, a red scarf bright against the pale day. Is that you? She asked. Depends who's asking. She smiled, and in that small lift of her mouth, he recognized a shape from the past. You probably don't remember me, she said. I was in your seminar 10 years ago. Modern American fiction. He studied her face, its mix of time and memory. Claire, she said. Claire Beaumont. Yes, he murmured, the name finding its way back. You sat near the window. You always argued with everyone. Still do, she said. It's a habit. They laughed. For a moment, the years folded neatly, like linens put away too long ago. What brings you here? He asked. I teach at the community college now. Someone said you'd moved here. I thought I'd see if it was true. Well, he said, rumors occasionally get lucky. She looked around at the house. It's beautiful. It's stubborn, he corrected. Like its owner. They sat on the porch steps, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. The sky had begun to clear, but the air still held a metallic chill. So, she said, you just left? No farewell lecture. No book. No nothing. He smiled. The department was already drowning in farewells. I didn't want to add another. They said you were brilliant, she said. But unpredictable. That's the kind way to say difficult. Were you? He thought about it. Probably. I didn't like meetings. Or people pretending to care. That tends to cause friction in institutions built entirely on pretense. She tilted her head. You could have done more. You know that, right? He looked at her. You sound like the letter. What letter? He told her, about the envelope. The single sentence, the absence of a name. She smiled faintly. Maybe someone wants you to regret something. He shrugged. Regret's overrated. It's like chewing gum. People just keep moving it around in their mouths until the flavor's gone. She laughed. You always did talk like that. Like what? Like the world was a metaphor you didn't quite trust. He liked that. It was true. After she left, he sat on the porch, watching the wind move through the trees. The letter was still in his pocket. He touched it not to read it, but to remind himself it existed. The afternoon light stretched thin across the lawn. Children's laughter drifted from nowhere in particular. He thought of her words, you could have done more. He could have, yes, the book his editor wanted, the conferences, the applause, but he had chosen something else, a life built without witnesses. Still, the sentence lingered, like an echo he hadn't made. That evening, he walked into town. The air smelled of chestnuts and wood smoke. He passed the church, the barber shop, the bookstore that never sold anything new. Inside the cafe, a few locals played cards by the window. The barista, a boy with green hair, looked up. "Evening, professor." "I'm not a professor anymore." "Once a professor, always a professor." He smiled. "That sounds more like a curse than a compliment." "Usual?" the boy asked. "Please." He sat in his corner, the one near the radiator. The cafe was dim and forgiving, a room where sound itself seemed tired. He took out his small black notebook and began writing. Not a book, not even a story, just fragments of thought, stray sentences with no destination. On one page, he wrote, "Maybe failure is just the name other people give to peace." He underlined it twice. When he looked up, a man stood nearby, a familiar face carrying the weight of years. "Elliot Crane," the man said, smiling cautiously. "I'll be damned." "Nathan Doyle," Elliot said, in the flesh. They had once been colleagues, friends, rivals, that complicated triad academia breeds. Nathan was everything Elliot was not: loud, ambitious, comfortably admired. "What brings you here?" Elliot asked. "Conference in Boston. Needed air. Heard rumors you were hiding out in this quiet little myth. Seems to be the theme of the day." They both laughed, though softly. Nathan looked around. "Nice place. You always like the edges of things." "I like what doesn't demand attention," Elliot said. "You look good," Nathan said. "Retirement suits you." "It suits my sweaters." Nathan chuckled. "You could have done more, you know." Elliot groaned. "Not you too." "What? You sound like my mail." Nathan raised an eyebrow, so Elliot told him about the letter. "Anonymous criticism," Nathan said. "Classic academic sport." Elliot studied him. "Do you ever think about what you might have been?" Nathan smiled. "I became it. Tenure. Books. Applause. And yet you're here," Elliot said softly. Nathan didn't answer. They talked until the cafe closed. Old stories, old wounds, the archaeology of a vanished life. When they parted in the mist outside, Nathan said, "You were always the smartest of us. You just didn't care enough to prove it. Maybe proof's overrated. Maybe. But the world forgets the quiet ones. Then the quiet ones are free." Elliot walked home through fog that seemed to breathe. The street lamps glowed like tired halos. Somewhere a train sighed against the dark. When he reached his house, the front door was ajar. He froze. Inside, everything looked as it had, except for one thing. The letter was gone. He stood still, listening. The radiator ticked again, softer now, like laughter from another room. He sat, not afraid, but alert, as if something he'd buried years ago had shifted beneath the floorboards of his life. Whoever had written the letter had come for it, or wanted him to notice its absence. He poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and looked out into the fog. The world was quiet again, but it was no longer still. Something had begun, a small tremor under the surface of his peace. He smiled, not knowing why. Chapter 2. The Woman at the Station. Morning began with rain, not the decisive kind, but the kind that seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to arrive or remember. It tapped against the window like a pianist searching for the right key. Elliot listened from bed. The sound had a patience he envied. He hadn't slept. The night had been full of questions that refused to announce themselves. Only the persistent hum of curiosity, low and steady. The missing letter hovered in his thoughts like an unanswered chord. Whoever had taken it knew exactly where to look and what silence to leave behind. He rose late, made coffee, and watched the rain blur the world into a single gray mood. The hedge he'd trimmed the day before drooped under the weight of water, subdued, humbled. Everything learns humility eventually, he thought. Even the living. By noon, he took the bus into town. His car had been stubborn for weeks, but he didn't mind. The bus was slow, a moving collection of small lives. The grocer, the woman with paint on her fingers, a boy asleep beneath the noise of his own music. He liked the anonymity of it, the permission to exist without definition. The driver, an old man with a tired kindness, nodded as he climbed aboard. "Rain's good for thinking," the driver said. "Or for hiding," Elliot answered. The man laughed. "Ain't that the same thing?" Elliot smiled faintly. Depends who's doing the hiding. He stepped off near the old station. It had the dignity of neglect, that quiet decay reserved for places once believed in. The benches were wet. The schedule board leaned slightly, like it had stopped trusting its own promises. 2 trains still passed through each day, morning and evening, both half empty, both punctual only by habit. Elliot used to come here to read when he first moved to town. Now he came to remember what stillness used to feel like. The air smelled of iron and rain. The tracks disappeared into a fog thick enough to seem deliberate. At the far end of the platform sat a woman beneath a blue umbrella. He might not have noticed her at all, except that she wasn't moving. Stillness, real stillness, has gravity. Her posture was poised, deliberate. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She looked as if she were waiting for something that had already happened. When she looked up, their eyes met, not for long, but long enough for memory to stir without name or shape. He walked toward her. "Afternoon," he said. She nodded once. "You're Elliot Crane." He blinked. "That's usually my line." "I used to know you," she said. "A long time ago. Give me a hint." "Margaret Heller." He exhaled softly. "My God. Maggie." Her smile appeared slowly, like light climbing a wall. "You haven't changed much." "That's because I never became anyone worth changing from." "You used to talk like that, too. Half serious, half hiding. And you used to call me out on it." She laughed. The sound was quiet, but it carried. They sat side by side as the rain softened to mist. 30 years collapsed with a kind of weary grace. They had met at a conference in Chicago, long ago, 2 young lecturers fueled by ideas and insomnia. There had been a night neither of them had spoken of since. "Still writing?" she asked. "Only to myself." "Still teaching?" "1 class. A night course. Half my students think I'm dead." She smiled. "And you?" "Still terrifying the ambitious." "I left teaching," she said. "My father got sick. After he died, I didn't go back." "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes. Mostly I miss believing that ideas mattered." "They still do," Elliot said. "They just make less noise now." A train passed through without stopping. The wind it carried lifted her hair and was gone. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You got my letter." He turned to her. "Your letter?" "The one that asked if you ever think about what you might have been." He stared at her. "That was you." She nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Or answer. I didn't know how." "That's an answer." He looked out toward the fog. "Why send it?" "Because you were the only person I knew who didn't seem to need approval. I wanted to know if that was still true." He smiled without humor. "You broke into my house to find out." "I didn't break in. I used the key under the stone frog." "You still hide it there." He groaned. "I should start hiding the past in harder places." "I just wanted to see if you'd kept the letter," she said. "You did. You could have knocked. I wasn't sure you'd open the door." "You're probably right." The rain stopped. The silence that followed had weight. Somewhere, a distant whistle mourned its own arrival. "I read your essay once," she said. "The one about solitude in American fiction. You wrote that solitude isn't absence, it's presence, amplified." He looked at her. "I'd forgotten that line." "I didn't. You kept track of me." "I kept track of the idea of you," she said. "The idea was safer." He smiled. "The idea of people usually is." They stayed that way, neither speaking, the station breathing around them. She told him about the town where she lived now, by the sea, mornings by the shore, evenings painting what light refused to hold still. He told her about the hedge, the quiet, the freedom of being invisible. "You really don't see yourself as a failure?" she asked. "No," he said. "Failure assumes a race." I stopped running. She studied him. "That's not failure. That's surrender." "Maybe. But surrender's only defeat when you still want victory." The platform lights flickered on. A few travelers appeared, pulling suitcases that whispered across the wet ground. Margaret rose. "I should go." "Where?" "Nowhere far. Just away for a bit." "You could come by sometime," he said. "The coffee's terrible, but there's plenty of it." She smiled. "Maybe." That sounds like a no. It sounds like a maybe, which is the closest I get to yes these days. The train's lights emerged through the fog, 2 small suns floating toward them. Before she stepped on, she turned to him. "Do you ever think about what you might have been?" He looked at her evenly. "Sometimes, but only on quiet days." "Then maybe this one counts." The doors closed. The train began to move. He watched until it was nothing but sound, then less than that. He stayed a while longer, alone on the platform, listening to the rain begin again. The world had the hushed quality of a page half-turned. He thought of that night in Chicago, the river, the laughter, the kiss that had felt like punctuation. She had told him then, "You hide behind wisdom like armor." He had answered, "Better armor than illusion." She'd kissed him for that, briefly, fiercely, then walked away before he could ruin it with more truth. Now, decades later, she had returned with the same question. He wondered what kind of answer she was really hoping for. The bus ride home was nearly silent. Streetlights dragged their gold reflections across the windows. Elliot took out his notebook and wrote, "To be seen without being explained. That's the closest we come to love." He closed the notebook, feeling the small ache of having said something true. When he reached his house, the porch light was on. He didn't remember leaving it that way. On the doorstep lay another envelope, pale blue this time. He picked it up. The handwriting was the same. Inside, "You said you stopped running. What if someone started running toward you?" No signature. He looked out into the quiet street. The rain had turned to mist again, soft as breath. He smiled, folded the letter, and slipped it into his pocket. Whatever this was, intrusion, confession, game, it had awakened something he hadn't felt in years, the pulse of possibility. He poured himself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched raindrops race each other down the glass. The radiator ticked once, twice, then fell quiet, as if listening too. He thought of her voice, her umbrella, her maybe, and whispered into the stillness. Maybe's enough for now. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills, the sound of distance arriving. Chapter 3. The Blue Envelope. The morning after the second letter arrived, the air felt sharpened, like the world had been rinsed clean and left to dry. Light slid through the kitchen window in long bars, slicing across the table as if measuring something unseen. Elliot stood there, holding the blue envelope again. He turned it in his hands the way one might turn a seashell, listening for a sound that might no longer exist. He had placed it beside the first one, the white letter Margaret had written. Two sentences now, sitting together like questions that refused to age. Do you ever think about what you might have been? What if someone started running toward you? He didn't know which unsettled him more, the question that looked back or the one that reached forward. He went into the garden. The earth was dark and generous after the night's rain. The roses, half wild, leaned toward him as he pruned them, their scent dense with memory. The act of tending soothed him, the small, measured work of reshaping life into order. Yet even there, his thoughts circled back to the letter's tone. It wasn't quite romantic, not threatening either, something in between, as if someone were writing from inside a dream where emotion and restraint coexisted uneasily. At noon, Anna the mail carrier arrived, cheerful and damp from the drizzle. "Morning, Professor," she said, handing him a small stack of envelopes. "Morning, Anna. Bills, catalogs, and one postcard. A photograph of the sea, gray, endless, horizonless. No return address." He flipped it over. The same handwriting, precise and calm. Every tide leaves something behind. He looked up, as though the sender might be watching from somewhere in the street. Only rain and the faint hiss of tires passing in the distance. "Everything all right?" Anna asked. He nodded. "Just correspondence from the past." She laughed politely and walked on. He pinned the postcard to the corkboard by the fridge, beside a grocery list and a fading note from years ago that read by lemons. "Think less." Then he sat down with his notebook and began to write a reply, though there was nowhere to send it. "If every tide leaves something behind," he wrote, "then so does every silence. I've learned to listen to both." He closed the notebook, feeling lighter. Sometimes the act of answering is its own form of faith. That evening he taught his night course, Modern American Short Fiction. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk and exhaustion. Most of his students were adults returning to education, people who'd taken detours and were brave enough to find their way back. He liked them for that. They listened differently, as if words had consequences again. He read aloud from Raymond Carver, then asked, "What makes a story complete?" A woman in the back said, "When everything's explained." He smiled. "No, when everything's felt. Explanation closes a story. Feeling keeps it alive." A few nodded. Others frowned. He didn't mind. Confusion, honestly held, was a kind of progress. After class, a student lingered. "Peter, a quiet man with the careful manners of someone who's learned to take up less space than he deserves. "Professor," Peter said, "you ever get letters from people who don't sign their names?" Elliot looked at him, the question catching him off guard. "Occasionally." "What?" "I got one last month. Said I should listen to what's been left unsaid. Creeped me out a little." "Did you listen?" "Not yet. Maybe it wasn't meant to frighten you," Elliot said. "Maybe it was meant to remind you." "Remind me of what?" "That someone's still paying attention." Peter smiled uneasily. "That's almost worse." "Only if you don't believe you're worth the attention," Elliot said. When he left campus, the sky was bruised with violet and gold. The air smelled of wood smoke and wet leaves. He walked home instead of taking the bus, the slow way, through back streets that still held the warmth of day. Halfway there, he thought he heard footsteps behind him. He stopped. Nothing, just wind. Still, a small unease threaded through him. Not fear, curiosity, sharpened by age. Back home, he poured himself a drink and sat by the window. The house was steady again, the kind of quiet that could be mistaken for peace. But something inside that quiet had tilted, as if the walls themselves had begun to lean toward the past. Why now? 30 years of silence, and then Margaret, then the blue envelope, then the sea. Could it all be her? Or had his life simply reached the age when the past began to write back? He opened a drawer filled with old letters, thin paper yellowed at the folds, the handwriting of entire decades stored in one small space. He found one addressed in Margaret's script, dated 1994. He slid it open carefully. "You once told me I mistake silence for strength. You were right, but I think you mistake retreat for wisdom." He read it twice. The words had aged well, the kind of sentence that doesn't expire, only deepens. He felt something between gratitude and annoyance, that she'd known him too clearly, too early. He crossed to the phone, found her number in an old directory, and dialed. 2 rings. Then a man's voice. "Hello." Elliot hesitated. Sorry. Wrong number." He hung up. But the sound of dialing, the act of reaching, had changed something. It was like striking a match without lighting a candle. The flame brief, the scent unmistakable. He began washing the dishes. Outside, rain whispered against the porch. Then a sound, a soft thump, just beyond the door. He froze, listening. Opened it. Another envelope. Blue again. He picked it up carefully. Inside, "You once said solitude was your truest companion. Are you sure she hasn't been lying to you?" He exhaled slowly. The tone had shifted, less philosophical now, more intimate. "Whoever wrote this knew where to press." He read it aloud. The words changed when spoken, not cold at all, almost tender. He looked into the dark, expecting nothing, yet feeling watched, not by malice, but by recognition. He didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, the blue envelope open beside his cup, listening as the rain rehearsed its quiet monologue. By dawn, he had made a decision. He packed a small bag, slipped the letter inside, and left the house. The train station was nearly empty, just the faint buzz of fluorescent light and the whisper of distant rails. He bought a ticket, not to anywhere in particular, only away. And there she was, Margaret, standing at the far end of the platform, her blue umbrella folded at her side. He approached her slowly. "We need to stop meeting like this," he said. She smiled. "Do we?" He held up the envelope. "Your handwriting." She looked at it, unflinching. "Yes." No denial this time. "No need. You were meant to know eventually." "Why all this?" he asked. "Letters, riddles, vanishing acts. What's the point?" "To see if you'd still answer," she said. "To see if you still could." "Answer what?" "Hunger," she said simply. He stared at her. "You'll have to elaborate. You spent half your life mistaking detachment for wisdom. You called it peace. I wanted to see if anything still stirred beneath it." And she stepped closer. A man who writes back is never entirely gone. The train arrived, a wind of sound and steam. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I don't know. Away from the waiting." "Then I'll come with you." He blinked. "You just decided that." "I've been deciding for 30 years. They boarded together. The car was nearly empty. The seats smelled faintly of dust and iron. He said, "You could have just called." She smiled. "You'd have answered with philosophy. I needed motion." He laughed softly. "Still teaching. Still learning," she said. The landscape slid by, small towns, bridges, fields left fallow for winter. She told him she'd been writing to him for years, but never sent the letters. Unread words are ghosts, she said. Eventually, they start haunting the writer. He nodded. And now I've stopped being haunted. He felt something uncoil inside him. A slow, forgiving recognition. Evening came. The train climbed through wooded hills. The sky folded itself into blue and ash. Do you ever think, she said quietly, that maybe we're all just writing letters to the people we once were? He looked at her reflection in the glass. Sometimes. But if we're lucky, those people write back. She smiled. Like you did. When the train slowed at a small rural stop, she gathered her coat. This is my station, she said. I thought. I wasn't going all the way, she said. Not yet. Will I see you again? She looked at him gently. You already are. Then she stepped off, her umbrella a blue flame in the fading light. Elliot watched her from the window. She raised her hand, not waving, just holding the moment still. The train moved on. He leaned back and took out the blue envelope once more. Are you sure she hasn't been lying to you? He smiled. Maybe solitude had lied, but it had also kept him alive long enough to witness this, the quiet return of something that could still move. He closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of the train become his heartbeat. For the first time in years, he didn't need to know where he was going. It was enough that he was in motion. Chapter 4. The House by the Water. He arrived 2 days later, carrying only a small leather bag and the last blue envelope. The train left him at a station that looked less like a destination than a pause, a place where travel ran out of breath. Beyond it, the sea began, wide and gray, shifting like thought. The town was so small it seemed almost imagined. Cottages leaned toward the wind, their roofs bowed in the posture of long listening. Hydrangeas browned in the salt air. The only road ran from the station to the water, lined with fences that couldn't decide whether they were still standing. Elliot walked slowly. His shoes collected sand. The air smelled of iron, of rain, of endings that weren't yet finished. He wasn't entirely sure why he had come, only that staying had begun to feel like holding his breath too long. At the edge of town stood an inn with 6 rooms and no sign. A woman with silver hair met him at the door. Her expression was neither welcoming nor suspicious, simply familiar with solitude. Few visitors this time of year, she said. The sea's beautiful, but it forgets to be kind. I don't need kindness, Elliot said. Just a place to think. She smiled. Thinking's what people call remembering when they don't want to sound sentimental. He nodded. Then I'm remembering, I suppose. The room faced the bay. The window rattled softly with each gust. Below, a narrow path led to the shore, where gulls stepped like small judges across the sand. He unpacked nothing. He placed the blue envelope on the desk and sat looking at it, as if patience might coax it to speak. Margaret's face lived in his mind. That stillness, that strange calm certainty. Not yet, she had said when she left the train. The words clung to him like the taste of salt. By morning, he was walking the shoreline. The water folded and unfolded itself endlessly, indifferent and exact. Driftwood lay scattered along the sand like forgotten gestures. He picked up one piece, pale, smooth, shaped almost like an open hand. He kept it without knowing why. Farther along, a house stood near the dunes. White paint peeling, windows shuttered, a porch with 2 chairs, one turned inward, one facing the sea. Something in its symmetry caught him. Recognition before memory. He approached. A blue umbrella leaned against the porch rail. Before he could knock, the door opened. Margaret stood there, calm as a completed sentence. I thought you might come, she said. He smiled faintly. You left me on a moving train. That tends to provoke curiosity. Then come in, she said. Curiosity deserves shelter. The house smelled of salt and old wood, and faintly of something floral, like dried lavender. Paintings hung on the walls, the sea in every mood of gray. Each canvas seemed to refuse drama. You paint, he said. Only what refuses to be written. That must keep you busy. Busier than solitude ever did. They sat by the window. The horizon was a single unbroken line, an argument the sea kept having with the sky. I didn't plan to follow you, he said. I know. Then why do I feel like you planned for me to? She smiled. Because you always confuse inevitability with choice. He laughed softly. You've spent a long time thinking about me. Not thinking, she said. Wondering. There's a difference. She made tea. The water hissed like an old secret. I kept writing after Chicago, she said. Essays, letters, Fragments. None of them good. But I wrote anyway. Why didn't you send them? I wasn't writing to you, she said. I was writing to the version of myself that existed when you still mattered. He winced. And now I'm seeing if she's still alive. They sat in the hush that follows truth. Do you remember, she said, that night by the river? You told me everyone you knew was afraid of being ordinary. I still believe that, he said. It's why people chase noise. And you? I chose quiet. She tilted her head. Quiet isn't always peace. He smiled. You came all this way to tell me I'm a coward? I came because you stopped believing anyone would bother to. He looked at her a long time. You sent those letters to provoke me. Yes. Did you mean to bring me here? I meant to see what you'd do when words stopped being enough. He nodded slowly. And what have I done? You're here, she said simply. That's new. The light thinned. Evening began to arrive in long, amber strands. He studied her hands, still steady, still painter's hands. They rested on her knee, folded like two thoughts agreeing to wait. You once told me I didn't know how to love, he said. You were right. She didn't answer. The sea did, a low, even breath against the shore. As the last of the daylight withdrew, she stood and crossed to a small wooden box on a shelf. She placed it in front of him. Open it. Inside were letters, dozens, maybe more, tied with a thin blue ribbon, all addressed to him. None sent. He touched them carefully. The paper had gone soft with years. They kept me, she said. He untied the ribbon. Read fragments aloud. You said you wanted a quieter life. I thought you meant one with me in it. I painted the ocean today. It wouldn't stay still. If you ever come back, knock twice. I'll know it's you. He looked up. You've been waiting. No, she said. I stopped waiting. Then I wondered if you had. They sat there in the blue-gray dark, the house filled with the slow ticking of an unseen clock. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want from me. Nothing, she said. Maybe just a witness. To what? To the fact that I didn't disappear. And neither did you. He nodded. That seems fair. She rose and opened the door. Night had gathered. The air outside shimmered with the scent of salt and pine. Walk with me, she said. They followed the path down to the beach. The moon hung low, a silver coin resting on the horizon. The tide was coming in, slow and deliberate. Waves reached for them, then retreated, like a thought reconsidered. You used to tell your students, she said, that stories end where understanding begins. Do you still believe that? He thought for a moment. I think stories end where the heart decides it's safe. Is yours safe? He looked at her. Not yet. Good, she said softly. Then we're still alive. They stood there, listening to the sound of the world breathing. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't romance. It was recognition, the faint, impossible comfort of being known. When the first drops of rain fell, neither of them moved. Back at the house, she handed him another envelope, unsealed, pale gray this time. Take it, she said. Don't open it yet. When should I? You'll know. He smiled. That's unhelpfully mystical. Only to someone who's forgotten how to trust instinct, she said. You used to be better at that. He laughed quietly. I used to be better at a lot of things. You're better now at the ones that matter. Later, in the small guest room, he lay awake listening to the sea. Its rhythm was ancient, patient, intimate. It spoke in repetition, not persuasion. He turned the envelope over in his hands, feeling its lightness. Inside, something thin, a page, perhaps, or a small photograph. He placed it on the nightstand and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, carrying fragments. The river in Chicago, the sound of trains, her voice saying not yet. When he woke, morning had returned, clear, windless, bright. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen. He reached for the envelope. It was gone. He searched the floor, the table, his pockets. Nothing. From the next room came her voice. Breakfast's ready. He joined her. She stood by the stove, humming softly. He didn't ask about the envelope. Some questions only ruin themselves when spoken. Instead, he poured coffee and watched the horizon through the window. The sea glittered like a secret. He didn't know what the day would bring, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out.